Hello and welcome to the new series of the It's a Lawyer's Life sessions. We're simply calling it It's a Lawyer's Life because that's what it's about. And my guest today is Fawzia King, who is a family law barrister at 42 Bedford Row. She is both a colleague of mine and a friend. And she is someone who I've had many long chats with about life in general. And I remember a couple of years ago, she and I were traveling back from court, I think it was in Brighton, and she was full of beans because she'd engaged a personal trainer, and she was absolutely loving what he was doing with her in terms of her physical health, her emotional health, her psychological health, and she was just glowing and looking beautiful. And then last spring, I heard from another friend of ours that Fawzia had heard some news which I think most women really dread. So first of all, welcome, Fawzia.
Hi, Rina.
And Fawzia, I want you to explain to us what point you got to last spring which really changed your life.
It did. There I was, as you say, full of beans, healthy, well, fitter than I've ever been. And I went to a routine mammogram. Routine, NHS screening, fabulous. I'm just going to give a shout out there. And you go along, you have a mammogram and you think, okay, I'm waiting for the letter. It's absolutely standard. And then I got a letter which didn't say what I thought it would say, which was, you're fine, see you in, and actually it said, oh, sorry, we can't give you the results. You have to come in for a further test, possibly a biopsy, and here's an appointment, and you don't believe it. Well, I didn't believe it at first. And there's nothing, it tells you absolutely nothing, no more than that. I was lucky. I have medical insurance, and I have to say, because I'm a control freak, everything has to be in my control. I have to know who my doctor is and so on. I was very fortunate. My hospital appointment revealed to me fairly quickly that basically these screenings can show very, very early forms of breast cancer. And they basically showed some cell changes. That's all they describe it as. So you have to have a biopsy.
Fawzia, I wanted to ask you, had you felt ill before you had this letter through?
No,
was
not
there
at
anything,
all.
because a lot of our viewers will want to know, what do I look for? What are the signs?
Well, there are very standard things that I think most women know about. That you should check yourself, you should check for lumps, you should check for any changes on a regular basis. And I have had absolutely nothing at all. And once I had the tests and so on, it was obvious why I had no symptoms whatsoever, because the screening program based breast cancer at probably the very earliest stages that it possibly can be. What the screening program catches, probably 10 years ago, you wouldn't have seen any sign of it until possibly 5, 6, 7 years down the line, whereupon it would be a far more serious situation. So I was incredibly lucky. It was caught at probably the earliest stage you could possibly. It's almost pre-cancerous. Not quite, but it's that early.
So what would you say to the women watching about having these regular tests to see if there is anything wrong? How important is it?
I say go to them. They're incredibly important. I was as cavalier as anybody, I think. You get them and sometimes, oh gosh, I'm so busy, I can't possibly. Luckily, in my area, they do, they can fit you in on a Saturday morning. So that helps enormously. So if you're working, you can ring, they'll change it for you. So that helps, but take them totally seriously. No, there's no doubt about it. I would say, don't ignore it.
At this early stage, Fawzia, when you don't get the standard letter back to say everything is fine,
yeah,
can you just share with us your own feelings about what it might be and the fear that there must have been in your mind?
Well, I certainly thought the worst, because as soon as you get a letter like that, you think, well, obviously there's something wrong. They would never send you that kind of letter. And it's the worst possible thing that could happen. And my immediate thought was, it's going to be, I'm going to have surgery, I'm going to have chemo, I'm going to have radiotherapy. In the end, I didn't have to have many of those things, but that's the first thing that comes into your mind. And for someone who is very routine, structure, knowledge of what to happen, important, it's the worst possible thing. And your mind, I think, goes into overdrive, and you think the worst.
And I think the other thing with professionals is that we have this feeling that we are somehow not vulnerable to what happens to other people. These bad things happen to other people.
Yes.
Would you say you fell into that category?
Yes, definitely. As in, you think, what? No, not me. It couldn't possibly be me. And I think particularly, and I think this probably applies to a lot of women, if you don't have a family history of it, for example, because I think some women do, they're perhaps more prepared, but it's not so much of a bolt from the blue. But I had no family history of it, and it was a complete shock. And as you say, it can't possibly be me. I think the first thought is, this letter, is this a mistake?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What does it mean? So it's an enormous shock. And then you have to process, and you have to, and for me, it was all about, okay, what am I going to do? What's my plan? I have to have that.
I also know, Fawzia, that you, like me, are very busy. We travel a lot for our work. We're going to court in all sorts of cities and towns around the country. So how do you fit in these medical appointments that you've suddenly got for something that you are totally shocked by, and maintain that professional, I'm fine, book me in for a case next week?
I have to say, I was, my first port of call was our senior clerk, who was incredibly supportive. I only told him and said, look, I'm having a series of tests. That was the first thing. And I'm going to be doing them on these dates. So I was lucky because, as I say, I had medical insurance, so I knew when my appointments were, and I had, that was my plan. That's how I planned. And I worked cases around those appointments. There are not that many. I mean, the first one was to have the biopsy and then the results, and, you know, there are a few appointments, but I worked around them. And when you go to court, it's like business as usual, isn't it? You just carry on as if nothing else is going on in your life, and you just get on with it. But it's a very short space of time. It was only literally 2 weeks. I then, in fact, as it happened, had a pre-booked holiday to go and see my mother, who lives abroad, and we decided we would go and do that. My surgeon, in fact, said to me that was probably a good idea to go and see my mum, so we did. As I was preparing for what by then I knew was going to be surgery, and it was going to be major surgery. But even though you know you have a plan, you're still, well, I was still in shock. I was in shock for really many weeks, actually. And so work helps a bit, but actually I think you have to balance that. There's no point thinking I can just carry on as normal. And I think I was able to accept that and say, I'm not going to just pretend there's nothing going on. I'm going to work the best way I can, but actually this is a priority. And then it was, because then I stopped working just before my surgery, because I decided that was the only way to cope.
And when I spoke to you, Fawzia, around this time, you said that you were preparing both physically, but also emotionally for the surgery that was coming up. And I just wanted you to talk us through what you were doing that you felt would help you through that treatment.
I carried on and in fact increased my personal training, which is a hugely important part of my life. I decided that I would train like a lunatic, basically, and just, I don't know, perhaps become even fitter. I truly believe in fit for surgery, and there's quite a movement in the States about that. You know, getting people as fit as they possibly can be before undergoing major surgery. And my personal trainer, who's a great friend of mine, was incredibly important in that journey. He didn't only support me physically through, you know, training me hard and getting me fitter. I'm fit, and I just wanted to be sort of super fit just before. But he also prepared me mentally. He prepared me, because I was terrified. My other thing that I was so terrified about was that I was going to have major surgery. When could I get back to training? Because I hate it when I can't train. Even 2 days off and I get very antsy. And I knew that I was going to have possibly, you know, 2 or 3 weeks not going to the gym. And I was worried about that. I think my fear was not just I have to undergo this surgery, but it was then I have to recover, and then I'm going to become incredibly unfit because I'm going to have to sit around recovering of that.
One of the things you did tell me, though, was that you were going through really a roller coaster of emotions, because although you would feel positive and strong one day, it could really change even on the same day or the next day. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, you're absolutely right. That's exactly how it was. You would feel fine one day and the next day you just think the worst. Because with me, my biopsy showed that I had cell changes that essentially had to be removed from one breast, and it was going to be quite a large area. And what that meant was that I had to have a bilateral mammoplasty. So I was going to have basically a boob job so that I had, even breasts. And you little of that, and it's terrifying. So even though you know what's going to happen, you have no idea what it's going to feel like afterwards, what it's going to look like afterwards, all of that sort of thing. So I did. One day I'd feel positive, next day I'd feel utterly appalling. And there were there was a lot of emotion, an enormous amount of emotion, and constant, until surgery. So that helps. Although I've since seen women who've had mastectomies and then reconstruction, if they choose, because not everybody chooses to. And in fact, it all looks amazing. It can look incredibly amazing. But I knew I wasn't going to have a mastectomy, but a major, I think the Americans call it a lumpectomy, but it's much more than that. You're removing an awful lot of tissue and basically reconstructing the whole breast. So I knew that was going to happen. And I think I wasn't so worried. I think because I had complete confidence in my very, very experienced woman surgeon. And it made a difference to me that she was a woman as well, actually. She was just incredibly experienced, but also she's good at judging her patients, obviously. She knew who she was dealing with me. I need detail, I need, lots of information. I want all the nitty gritty. And she knew that, and she could tell me. So I wasn't worried about physically how it would look. And in fact, surgeons are very good at sort of showing you photographs so that you're prepared for it in a sense that the type of surgery you'll have, it'll kind of look like this. And that helped.
So talk us through that recovery process then, once you've had that major surgery.
I recovered very, very quickly. I think not everybody does. I did, and I did because I'm fit. I have no doubt about that. I was, in fact, you're only in kind of overnight. They like to chuck you out as quickly as possible, and that's a good thing. You're far better off at home. And I was determined that I was going to go out and start exercising within days. And I did. I think on day 3, I went out and I was walking. So I would walk 4 kilometers, something like that, to begin with. And I felt that was an incredibly important part of my recovery, just getting outside, walking. My husband accompanied me for the first week, just to make sure I didn't keel over or something. But it was pretty obvious I wasn't going to, and that helped. And then and then I started doing, they recommend sort of gentle physio exercises that you do with your arms and so on, and I was doing that from from about day 4 or 5, because I was absolutely determined that I would be back to physical fitness as soon as possible. And I was just gently increasing exercise, and I was able to get back into the gym with my trainer 3 weeks after surgery. So that was wonderful. That was a real milestone for me. Yeah. And again, because I've got such an amazing trainer, you then exercise according to your ability, obviously increasing as you go along. And I found that, again, an enormous help in my recovery.
And what about diet? Because I know you're something of a food connoisseur, and you're a great cook. How important was the diet and the general self-care that you had to do, regardless of any medical treatments?
I ate and continued to eat as well and as healthily as I always did. I think that is an important part of it. We've always been big on home cooked food, that even on the busiest of days it's always possible to do that. So that just continued, and that too is an important part, as you say. But in terms of self-care, I think you have to very quickly say to yourself, I'm not going to do everything all at once. My determination was I was giving back. I gave myself, I took several months off. I was off from April, when I had my surgery, until the end of July. Yes. And I was able to do basically lots of things and be properly prepared before I went back to work. I think that's quite important. I think quite a lot of people are very anxious about getting back to work, especially people like us. You're self-employed, you want to get back, don't you? But I felt it was important to just say, do you know what, that has to be secondary. First of all, I have to be both physically and mentally prepared to return to the fray, as it were. And I think I was.
And in terms of returning to work, did you start straight away, or did you take it gradually?
I took it gradually, just in the sense that, and it's now how I'm working going forwards, which is, I had the discussion with our clerks, and it was that I wasn't going to go back to and we all know it, one case after another, unrelenting, with only a weekend in between. I now take gaps in between cases, because I felt that if there were any lessons learned from this, it was that I had to do things at my own pace and on my terms. I think, we all spend, and I had spent, 25 plus years working in a different way, just doing what we all do, going from one case to another, until the point where you just feel as if you're going to collapse and you desperately need a holiday. Well, I said I wasn't going to work like that anymore. And my clerks have been very helpful and very supportive with that. And I felt that was the right way to go forward. And so far, so good. It's worked.
And Fawzia, obviously we can see you're looking very healthy. How are you feeling in yourself?
I feel now, but it's a year now, just over, since I had the surgery. I feel incredibly well. I was lucky. I only had to have the surgery. The further biopsies after my surgery revealed that I did not require radiotherapy. That was going to be standard. It is often standard that you do that, but I was told that it was everything was completely clear. I'd had to have sentinel lymph node biopsy as well, and that showed that that was clear. So that's quite. I was lucky. I didn't have to have radiotherapy, which can be quite debilitating, only in the sense that it's tiring, but I didn't need it. I'm very grateful for that. I simply then continued exercising my way back to full fitness and health. And the only thing now is that I have to have regular checks once every, in fact, it's only annual. I've had my first annual check just before lockdown, and it was I'm clear. So
Fantastic.
You know, it's as good as I could possibly hope for. So I'm fit and well, and operating generally, you know, at work as I always did. I think though it takes longer to recover mentally than it does physically. And I hadn't realised that that would be the case. I think it does take its toll mentally.
And can you just explain that a little more? Perhaps give us some examples of times when it has taken its toll on you.
I think sometimes, especially last year, it's got a lot easier. That there would still be times, and this was after I was obviously back at work, where I felt I wasn't as resilient. I didn't feel as strong as I had before. I think because you've just had the realization that actually you're not invincible, that things can happen to you that aren't necessarily in your control. And it's hard to actually accept that there are some things you can't take full charge of, because I like to be in full charge of everything in my life. And you have to adjust to that mentally, I think. And again, I did that through, or I was helped in that process through yet more exercise. I find that the sort of quieter exercise helps with that. Pilates, and I'm not big on yoga because I'm not stretchy enough. But just quieter exercise helps mentally. So that was important too.
Yeah, Fawzia, you've talked quite a bit about your personal trainer, and I know that on that train journey back from court, you were practically raving about, you were quite evangelical, I think you said yourself,
yes,
about the importance of personal training for you. And I just want to end with, there's an article, if anyone wants to read it, on It's a Lawyer's Life, which Fawzia wrote about her experience of personal training and how it had really changed her life. So I do recommend that you read that. But just for the benefit of our viewers now, Fawzia, first of all, is it an investment for your future to hire a personal trainer?
I think so. It helps. For me, it set me on my fitness journey about 6 years or so ago, and I've never looked back. It's good to provide structure because I thrive on structure. Lots of people do. It's much harder just to say, I'm going to start training. I'm going to start going to the gym. I think that's why so many people take out gym memberships and then don't go after the first, the golden 2 months of the year, because it can be boring, actually. Whereas a personal trainer, especially, and you know, it's like any sort of therapist, actually. You have to find the right one to suit you. And I did. I was just fortunate. And as I say, he's become a great friend as well. And he provides the structure, and frankly, he provides the knowledge. I mean, what do I know about, you know, what series of exercises will develop the muscles in my arms best, or make me stronger? Sure, you can, you know, look online, but you know what? It's too much like hard work. Much easier just to get a professional to tell you the right things to do and how to do it. And also, he keeps it fresh. You know, everything is every session is different. It makes it interesting because I don't deny it. Gyms can be boring places, let's face it. And it's not boring with a trainer.
You also said that it's actually helped, the personal training has helped you with your work, because before you would have 3 hours of work to do in the evening, and it would really cause you a lot of stress. But now you make sure that you go out for that hour of personal training before you sit down to do that work. So how has it helped in that respect?
Yes. I've found that it's just quite simply, it gives you more energy. So you've had a long day in court, you come home, you know that you've got, I don't know, 3 hours more work to do, as well as have dinner, you know, all the things that we face day to day. And I find that just knowing that, 7 o'clock, I'm going to the gym, I'm seeing my trainer, you take that time. It fits, it works. You go, you do an hour. And I find that I come back after exercise and I come back energized. I come back ready to do the work. And probably I'm a bit more focused. I can do it faster, actually. Well, it feels like it. And because I don't feel so exhausted. So in fact, expending the energy in the gym, interestingly, makes you feel more energized and gives you more energy to get on with the rest of the evening and prep for that case next day. And that's why I think it's an investment, because it gives me the energy to live the life that we need to, doing the job that we do.
And you also said that it not only helped you physically, and you've mentioned your personal trainer's involvement in helping you prepare emotionally for your surgery, but just generally, how has the physical training affected your emotional and psychological well-being?
I think it makes me feel stronger because I don't. I think it's, if you're training and you're physically fit, you don't have those. I don't have the sort of aches and pains that I think everybody has from time to time. You don't feel so exhausted, and when you're not physically exhausted, or you don't feel physically exhausted, you feel mentally more alert. And I think it's well known, isn't it, that exercise certainly can help with illnesses like depression. It truly does. I haven't suffered from depression, but I know many people who have, and have found that physical exercise helps enormously. Because when you feel well in your body, I think the mind follows.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how it works for me, certainly.
And in terms of weight loss or maintaining weight,
Yes.
how helpful has it been in respect of that?
Crucial. I can't possibly bake and eat those things if I'd without doing that training. No, it's been great, actually. You can just, go train, feel good, and then you want to eat well. Actually, I don't tend to want to eat rubbish, but I do like a bit of baking. So, got to have a bit of cake sometimes, haven't you? And
absolutely.
It's guilt-free, totally guilt-free.
Fawzia, you've been absolutely wonderful. I'm sure you're going to inspire a lot of our viewers and readers. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us and your journey, really, through a very difficult year last year. And it's fabulous to see you looking so healthy and just full of life again. And this is the Fawzia we used to know. So thank you so much. And hopefully lots of people will give us some feedback, and I'm sure you'd be willing to answer any questions that anybody had.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you very much, Rena.
Thank you, Fawzia.